Now, I don't play many survival games, but when I do, I usually want to play with a friend. There's something special about barely surviving in a crappy home to living the good life with a friend. We even managed to get 100 hours on this game in just a couple months, and the only other survival game that personally competes with that is The Forest. I played that game many years ago and got more than 100 hours with this same friend, and I kinda compare every other co-op survival game to it. Raft is a game I've had wishlisted for a while now, and when that final chapter update came out in June, taking this game out of early access, I was sold. I showed this game to my friend and he immediately wanted to get it. I normally don't buy games when they first come out, but this isn't a AAA game. It was only $17 when it came out, and just looking at the title of this video, I definitely got my money's worth. My first impression of this game was so good, even if we screwed up a couple times and had to restart. It was fun learning all those basic things in a survival game, like managing your hunger, thirst, collecting items, and the way you do most of those things in this game is pretty different. You start with a basic hook and quickly learn that you have to throw it and hook in these materials to collect them. I like the whole raft concept and how that affects everything. Like, if you're thirsty, what are you gonna do? Drink from the ocean? No, you're gonna make a water purifier and eat the fruits, you dummy. Like, oh no, you're getting hungry, what shall I ever do? Spoiler alert, you just killed a goddamn shark. I'm tired of this guy stalking me and eating my goddamn raft anyway. Well, you'll probably start by eating fruits and birds, but don't worry, you'll build up to getting that shark, and even the process of being afraid of the shark to whooping his ass was really cool. Obviously, you'll need to survive by making new items and expanding your raft. The crafting system is pretty simple, but it got the job done for me because there were just enough items and I liked the progression. It was exciting discovering everything in the beginning, especially the animals. A lot of the coolest animals at the start were just for show, but it was still pretty cool at first. You quickly learn how much of an asshole the birds are, but then you quickly learn that you can make them go away or just chill with you. Or eat them. But one of my favorite parts with the animals is that you can catch some of them. My friend really liked the idea of this, and we had our own little system with naming them and giving them a nice home. This game can bring out the best in people. But on the other hand, we have the combat where you poke everything with a stick. And that's basically the combat in a nutshell. Oh, the shark is biting your raft? Just poke him a couple times. Oh, you see a bird eating your crops? Just give it a quick poke. Oh shit, you see a wild hog and a goddamn bear? Then you might be fucked. But not really. If you're with a friend, both of you can easily double team that hog, and for something like a bear or even a pufferfish, then you might want to make a bow. You don't need it, but boy does it help a lot. Well, you need it to kill the Screecher, but this is when you get the opportunity to shit on some noobs. You know what? You didn't hear it from me, but one of the best strategies is actually just spamming your bow. Like, you'll be able to kill Bruce in no time, that piece of shit. I don't know if they'll patch that strategy, but you didn't hear it from me. Alright, I'm making fun of the combat, but I really didn't mind it. There's a bunch of things to manage and maintain in this game, so I didn't mind the simple combat, but I can understand wanting a bit more. But one thing that I thought was more fleshed out was the story and everything surrounding it. Now that's a bit of a misleading statement because I really enjoyed traveling to new areas and all the different settings, but I'm not much of a story person and I was just messing around with my friend. I can't tell you much about the story, except that it's good. Yeah, well at least I can't spoil it, right? I can tell you that the shark's name is Bruce and that he's a piece of shit, but that first area you visit gives you basic clues and information, and as you get deeper into the game, you learn and see a lot more. I like how the story can be told within the world itself, giving a Fallout kind of vibe, and there's another important way the story is told within the game, but I want you to discover it yourself. Visiting new story areas is one of the most exciting and fun parts of the game, but before you do that, you have to have control of your raft and practice going on these little islands first. This was mostly my friend's job. You at least need the materials from these little islands, and the way you approach them in the early game and late game is pretty different. At first, you won't have an anchor, then you'll have a crappy anchor, and then you'll have a good anchor. Your priorities will change depending on what items you need. It's actually really cool going to these little islands in the late game because then you can get a metal detector. And eventually you could really upgrade your raft into more of a ship and you get more control of it. My friend really enjoyed this part of the game, and I thought it was really cool how we both had different jobs based off our different play styles. Like, he would steer the ship and went fishing while I smelted the ores and maintained the animals. We both had multiple jobs, and it always felt like there's something to do in a good way. It always felt like you're making progress and never wasting time, if you know what you're doing. A result of this is getting immersed and sinking hours into this game. There's not a lot of games I can do that with nowadays, so that's a huge plus for Raft. But as easy it is to get immersed, it's not that hard to break that immersion. Now don't get me wrong, most of these problems are minor and don't steer me away from the game, but it's enough to mention. The first one could be some of the FPS lag. It seems like the deeper you get into the story and the further you get, the laggier it gets. I started out with maxed out graphics settings, but I had to turn them mostly all the way down by the end. This felt like a typical indie game problem, and I was hoping more from this game being out of early access. This next one might be on my end, but at some points of the game you run into these puzzles, and I do like the variety in the gameplay. I just thought some of them were confusing enough to look up, which slowed down the pace a bit. I don't know if this one's on me, maybe I'm stupid, maybe my friend is stupid. Either way, I thought it was worth mentioning. Also random things, like catching a rare animal and it randomly disappearing before getting back to the raft. That could be goddamn annoying, but some of the problems are actually cool though, because you could use it to your advantage, like walking on the sides of mountains to avoid Bruce, and going down them to save time while avoiding fall damage. It was very reminiscent of the mountains in Skyrim. You can just see through the cracks, and there's probably other little things I'm forgetting, but most of these aren't a huge deal to me. It just gives me more of an indie game feeling, and you might especially feel this way depending on what you think of the end game content. Now, I'm pretty open-minded about the late game in Raft, and there's many reasons for this, like playing co-op the entire time, and me not playing many survival games before this, but I could understand why some people think there's not enough endgame content. After you beat the story, it's kinda up to your imagination, which I don't entirely think is a bad thing. I rarely played Minecraft survival mode to beat the Ender Dragon, for example. I just gave myself my own goals. The same mostly went for the forest, but I kinda regret it because that game has a pretty good story from what I've heard. In those games, the story feels more optional, but in this game, it feels like you have to go through it to progress and survive. So what do you do when you beat the story? Well, personally, I still had a lot of goals I wanted to complete, and I still wasn't done expanding my raft and surviving with my friend. At this point, you've researched about everything in the research table, but that doesn't mean you found every item. That's where the original islands and the metal detector come in. You'll still need resources to survive and to expand your raft, as well as visiting the trader, but you can also find cool stuff like new paintings and even cassette tapes that you can listen to. Not to mention the music, because the soundtrack is really good and relaxing. It even reminded me of Minecraft sometimes. Oh, and the radio was really cool too. We would actually start to remember all of the songs and joke around with the lyrics. I was actually really impressed with the in-game radio. It's better than the real-life radio. But I think the late game depends on how you personally feel about the game. You're on a goddamn raft in the middle of the ocean. Just that idea sold over 100,000 people on the game, including me. But the numbers for this game are actually pretty insane though. There was a peak of just barely 100,000 players and an average of 20,000 players when Raft got out of early access in June. And of course the numbers are most likely to go down after its peak, but so far Raft seems to be holding onto their players pretty well. It seems like these updates bring in a lot of people, and they don't do them often, but I can see why this 1.0 update was such a big deal. It just makes me wonder what their next update will be and what type of content they add. There's definitely some minor things they can fix, but I wonder how much they'll add over time. The forest left me slightly disappointed in that way, but it was probably because of my expectations. My expectations are a lot more realistic now, and I didn't expect too much after that final story area, so it comes back to how much you enjoy the game along with things like the building and combat system. We thought it was fun decorating the raft and collecting animal heads. We also created an army of llamas. It helps if you find joy in things like this. I also don't think I'd play this game by myself. I do enjoy the little things you have to do to survive, but it can get a little tedious doing certain things sometimes, and I imagine you don't get much of a break by yourself. The difficulty also seems like it would be difficult by yourself. Peaceful mode is for pussies, and hard mode seems pretty damn hard, so that middle ground with easy and normal is pretty good, but you wouldn't have anyone to revive you by yourself. But as a co-op survival game, Raft has to be one of the best out there. I've been doing my best to avoid major spoilers, but I had to give you some details with all this experience. And I know I still forgot some things, but even if you don't make it this far in the game, there's still a lot to experience in your first 20 hours, and the less you know, the better. I'm still achievement hunting, so I could get well over 100 hours, especially if I play this game again in the future. Just look how many in-game days we got in 100 hours. I still need to make it to a full year, and who knows, I might make a follow-up video in the future, but we'll see. If I had to end off by saying one thing, Raft is one of the best survival games I've ever played. Just remember you're hearing that from someone who doesn't play many survival games because they mostly look boring or have PvP that I don't enjoy, and remember that I had a good friend to play with the entire time. And don't you just love to see a successful indie game? I've been done with modern AAA games for a while now, and Raft is just a breath of fresh air if you appreciate a good indie game. It gave me that feeling a new game is supposed to give you, so to me, it was definitely worth it. I hope you know how much I appreciate you listening to my experience. I hope it was enough for you to start your own rafting experience, and since you did make it this far, you might as well drop a like. Please, it's all I ask. And you might want to consider subscribing if you like my content or want to discover good and different types of games. I'm open to any dialogue if you want to get a discussion going, like my top 2 co-op survival games being The Forest and Raft. Drop a comment if you agree or disagree. You can check on the screen for some of my other videos. I also uploaded some shorts for this game on my second channel, so be sure to check that out. And yeah, Raft isn't perfect, but it's close enough and it's an experience I won't forget. Alright guys, peace.